Hey everybody, it's me, your good buddy Thorne. I want to start talking a little bit about the Army composition, a little bit, and then we're going to talk about kind of throwing together an archery impression, because we hadn't really talked about that. We talked about archery a little bit, and we talked about the characteristics of the bows that we can use at Bicoline and effective ranges and that sort of stuff, but we didn't really talk about the rest of it. So here are my ideas on archery for Bicoline. You ready? Let's go. All right. Talking about archery, it's pretty effective as a weapon system, and we touched upon that in some of the archery pieces. But, you know, it's not done enough in mass combats. It should be very, very effective, and it really isn't. Simply because a lot of people don't understand it, they don't want to do it, they'd rather do something else. And that's fine. We're here to have fun and play the game, right? But in order to be an effective army, we really need to take a look at how to win the game, how to build the army. Does that make sense? So I want to look at a couple slides that I've thrown together, and let me pull it up here. All right, typical army deployment and for Middle Ages, and any kind of war game that you're fighting, any kind of medieval reenactment, or let's say tabletop war game. Let's talk miniatures. Let's go to miniatures for just a second and take a look at this formation. This is pretty typical army deployment. You've got your left wing, your right wing, and your center wing. Now, they were called different things over time period, but that's basically, you're in the center of the army with a heavier troops, or in fact, it could be medium infantry too, but we're just using that term for right now. And your right wing and left wing. And they were kind of divided up this way because it's easier for one person to control a small amount under the overall command of a general. Now, the general in this picture is our 2-star, and then we got a first lieutenant with the left wing and a second lieutenant with the right wing, just to give them names, okay? We got skirmishers out on our flanks, and we got archers, in this case, behind the formation. And then we got our logistics in the back. So that's kind of when we're talking deployment, this is kind of what we're talking about, all right? So let's go to the next slide. Now, archers, they're kind of placed for maximum effect. For our game in Bicoline, they probably don't have very little armor, and they're very mobile and able to respond quickly to the commander's choices. Now, in this first slide, I did have them in the back, but they could be placed heavy on the wings or wherever the commander needs them, okay? And now let's take a look at skirmishers real quick. Skirmishers, they could also have bows, but their primary purpose is to scout ahead and to harass the enemy, break up their formations before they get to our main line, okay? Now, the next one we want to take a look at is our medium infantry, and we've already kind of looked at this before. I've got 2 videos on it. And this image is a different medium infantry impression. This is me in a full male halberd with chainmail, or a male coif with a crusader helmet. Easily could be a spearman, easily given a shield, could work in the shield wall. Very mobile. Well, mostly mobile and able to respond quickly to commands, can form the majority of the army, okay? And then our heavies, which we just wrapped up that whole video series, that heavy troops are your elite. Now, I'm talking historical. I'm not talking about the Ordo, but historically, the elite troops make up pretty much less than a third of the overall force. And my definition, heavy plate defenses, and I use the strike force or assault force, usually forms the center of your line. That's a strong force, or it could be used as a reserve force, okay? All right. And like I said, watch my 2 videos on these guys, and it kind of explains it a little bit better, okay? Now, when we're talking medium infantry deployment, we're really talking about, as General Fells talked about, that triad of 3 people, 2 shields and a spear. And you see that in this video. For a sergeant or a squad commander, really can effectively control about this many troops. That's about it. Any more than this, and it just gets too complex. And so that infantry squad, you've got your 8 shields or 4 spears and 1 sergeant. 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So, and 13 all total with the sergeant. There's 13 in that squad. And that's, that's about what a modern infantry squad has now. Because that sergeant can control effectively about 13 guys, or 12 guys. This formation could be changed up a little bit. But generically, this is kind of what most of the battle games go with. SCA formations are very, very typical, or very, very much this way. And General Fells' tactics book draws a lot from his experiences and our experiences from the SCA into heavy combat, or the Bickeline combat mode. Most of your armies are going to see this. As the general says, it's how many spears we can bring onto the battlefield. Okay? Now, a wing deployment is 2 or more of those squads. I've only put 2 on here, but it could be more than that. It could be up to about 4. Any more than that, the lieutenant starts having a hard time controlling those 4 maneuver units. They work together, but they are separate. You can see it's 16 shields form the front line, 8 spears with the 2 sergeants controlling each one of those squads, and then the lieutenant officer controlling that wing. And really, effectively, that's a pretty good sized element, And for that lieutenant to control that in battle, he's got to be pretty good. Okay. Now, next, army deployment. Now, this is minus the archers and skirmishers, which we'll talk about later. But with those 3 wings, we're really talking about 81 combat effectives in our line infantry. Now, these are 3 medium infantry wings. I haven't really talked about the heavy infantry deployment, and I'll probably do another video on that. But that gives you 24 spears, 48 shields, 6 sergeants, and 3 lieutenants. Now, each one of those wings makes up 8 triads. Okay? So those little boxes that you see, that's a triad group. And so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in a wing, and overall 24, the equal number of spears. And that's really kind of what we're talking about. And not counting our archers and skirmishers. Throw the archers and skirmishers into there, depending on how many we have. Now our combat effective forces, excuse me, now our combat effective forces really add up to about 100, 120, 130 guys on the field, soldiers on the field. And, realistically, that's a big frickin' army when we talk about LARPing and combat troops. So, let's get forward into talking about how to put an archery impression together. And there's one more photo that I want to show you, and this is an excellent photograph that shows that infantry impression, or that archery impression. Okay, so here it is. Now I want you to take a look at this. Excuse me. This is the best picture I've seen of our archery combat. Okay, you've got your line infantry up front with your shields and spears, and then behind that you've got archers up on the high ground in formation and shooting. And that's kind of what we want to do. Okay, look how lightly armored they are. And that's very, very important to recognize. So, with that said, let's take a look at putting an archery impression together. Okay? Let's go. So here I am. I'm outfitted as an archer for the Ordo. Historically, archers were usually from the peasant class or the lower class, and they might not have a full uniform. Now, our archers will. They'll be on their same tabards that that we'll all be wearing with the tan and the green. But what I've done for this impression is kind of built that lower class or peasant bowman impression. So I'm still wearing the same heraldry colors. I've got my green hood, my green hat, I've got my feathers, I've got my badge on my cap, symbolizing that I am part of the Ordo. But I am not dressed out in a full armor kit. You know, you've got your quiver full of arrows. You've got to have, you know, 8 or at least 6 arrows to go on the battlefield, and I'd recommend you have about 15 or 20. I've got my bow, which we've talked about. And the thing to understand about bow, if you're going to be an archer, is your effective range. How far can you shoot? And as we've discussed, it's about 30 paces for a direct target. So if you figure that out, how far you need to shoot, 30 paces. One of the other reasons I went with this color scheme is if I'm up into the woods, I'm going to be harder to see in browns and greens. I'm not sticking out that much. It's almost an active form of camouflage. So let's take a look at what I'm wearing, okay? I've got my boots on, and I've got Epic Armory, your typical standard trousers. They're drawstring rights, drawstring bottom. I've tucked them into the boots. I've got an underkilt or undershirt or under tunic of white, and over that I've got my two-tone tunic of a dark brown and a light brown, and then I've got my green hood. This green hood, I believe, is Epic Armory, and it's very nice. I like it a lot. And then I've got my hat or some kind of covering for my face. As you can see, studio lights are very, very bright. I can bring them down, and I'm going to be able to see a little bit better. My quiver is on my belt rather than over my shoulder, so I can easily get to my arrows, knock them, and be ready to fight. And as you can see, I suck as an archer. Quickly knock them and be ready to fight. So, very straightforward. This is all kit that I've already had. I've got my pouch. I've got some defensive capabilities with my sex in the back. I could easily put a short sword on as well. Historically, archers were very lightly armored. Sergeants in the archers might have some armor, and maybe we'll take a look at that sometime. But they need to be lightly armored in order to move fast. The other thing I do not have on, I do not have my arm guard on. Now, in real archery, you're definitely going to want to have an arm guard of some piece. A leather interior arm guard, protect from the drawstring. When it's coming back and forth on your arm, you are going to pick up some things, and that's something we need to do. They've also mentioned having a hand guard or finger guard, because this bow, as you can see, does not have an arrow rest, so that arrow is going to lay right on top of here. Now, when you fire that arrow, if you've never fired an arrow before, those fletchings will come right across the top of that, and over time will cause some damage and scratching and cutting. So, something to consider. Glove or archery glove, archery arm guard of some kind, and I think we'll show you how to make a quick one, maybe in another video series. You've got your waist belt with your quiver. You've got your knife or some kind of defensive capability. You've got your clothing with right out of your basic costuming kit, trousers and shirt. You could easily go with a shirt with this. Throw over the talbert. I went with a different look with our tan and green heraldry colors. I should be able to be I should be able to be picked out as an Ordo member wearing this. But I also might put on a heraldry badge of some kind. Let's say something very similar to this, and the Bezigoos would be easy to make and put on here, or even the Ordo's colors. It's all about what you want to do with this impression. And as we can see, our heavy infantry and our lightly armored archer, we're getting pretty close to being ready to go. All right, we'll let you go for now. I really wanted to talk about the archery aspect, and it's nice enough that we can go outside and do some video taking today too. Okay? We'll see you later.